It was a cold December night in 1985. Snow covered the ground, creating a thick, white blanket that muffled every sound. The wind howled outside, sending chills down anyone's spine who dared to venture out. Whitley Strieber was in his cabin in upstate New York, nestled deep within the woods, far from the nearest town. He was a horror writer, known for his chilling tales that kept readers up at night. He thought he knew what fear was, having explored the darkest corners of the human mind. But he was wrong. What was about to happen would terrify him more than anything he could imagine, more than any story he had ever written. Strieber was alone in the cabin trying to work on his next book. The words weren't coming easily, and he found himself staring at the blank page more often than not. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The warmth was comforting, but it couldn't chase away the growing sense of unease. It was a peaceful night, or so he thought. The snow outside created a serene, almost magical landscape. Little did he know that something was lurking outside, something that would change his life forever. The woods, usually a source of inspiration, now seemed menacing. Strieber started to hear strange noises outside. At first he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him. It sounded like something was moving around in the woods, rustling through the snow and underbrush. He tried to ignore it, but the noises got louder, more insistent, as if whatever was out there was getting closer. He peeked out the window, but he couldn't see anything. The darkness outside was impenetrable, hiding whatever was making the noise. He was starting to get scared. His heart pounded in his chest and his mind raced with possibilities. The feeling of unease grew stronger, wrapping around him like a cold, invisible hand. Strieber's senses were on high alert. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind seemed amplified. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was as if unseen eyes were following his every move. He decided to investigate, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange sounds and his growing fear. Armed with a flashlight, he stepped out into the cold, snowy night, unaware of the terror that awaited him. Strieber grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. The cold air hit him like a wall, sharp and biting. He shivered, pulling his coat tighter around him as he ventured further into the yard. He could hear his heart pounding in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. The darkness seemed to press in on him from all sides. He shone the flashlight into the darkness, but he still couldn't see anything. The beam cut through the night, revealing only more shadows. Then he saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the woods. It was barely visible, a silhouette against the trees. The figure was tall and thin, almost unnaturally so. It seemed to be wearing some sort of cloak, the fabric blending seamlessly with the darkness around it. Strieber couldn't make out any features, as the darkness obscured its face. It was like staring into a void. He called out to the figure, but it didn't answer. His voice seemed to be swallowed by the night. It just stood there, watching him. The stillness of the figure was unnerving, as if it were waiting for something. Strieber took a step back, his heart racing. He felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know what to make of the strange figure. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it a lost hiker, someone in need of help, or something more sinister? He had written about terrifying creatures, but nothing could prepare him for what he was witnessing. The figure began to move towards him. It was slow, deliberate. It didn't walk, but rather seemed to glide over the snow as if it were floating. Strieber stood frozen in place, fear gripping him like a vice. He couldn't move, couldn't think. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt tight, his voice lost to the terror that consumed him. The figure was upon him in an instant. Strieber felt a sharp pain in his head, and then everything went black. He had no idea how much time had passed when he woke up. He was no longer outside his cabin. He was in a small, round room with no windows. Strieber sat up and looked around. He had no idea where he was or how he got there. The walls of the room were smooth and cold. There was a faint humming sound coming from somewhere. He felt a strange mixture of curiosity and terror. He was not alone. There were 3 beings in the room with him. They were short and slender with large black eyes. Their skin was gray and hairless. They were wearing some kind of uniform. Strieber had never seen anything like them before. The beings communicated with Strieber telepathically. They asked him questions about his life, his thoughts, and his beliefs. Strieber was scared, but he also felt strangely compelled to answer their questions. The beings were particularly interested in his emotions, almost as if they were trying to understand the very essence of human experience. They wanted to know what it was like to feel fear, joy, and love. These emotions, so intrinsic to human life, seemed to be a mystery to them. They seemed to be studying him, like a scientist might study a lab rat, meticulously observing every reaction and response. Strieber felt like he was part of some kind of experiment, an unwilling participant in a grand cosmic study. The beings performed a series of physical and mental tests on Strieber, probing the depths of his mind and body. They took samples of his blood and tissue. They scanned his brain, searching for something unknown. They even seemed to implant something in his nasal cavity, though he could never figure out exactly what it was. It left him with a lingering sense of unease. Throughout the experience, Strieber felt a strange mix of emotions, a cocktail of fear, curiosity, and bewilderment. He was terrified of these beings and what they were doing to him. The fear was palpable, almost suffocating, but he was also curious about them. What drove them to conduct these experiments? Where did they come from? What did they want? These questions haunted him. Why had they chosen him? Out of all the people in the world, why him? Time seemed to lose all meaning inside the strange room. Minutes felt like hours, and hours like days. Strieber couldn't tell if minutes or hours were passing. The concept of time became irrelevant. The beings continued their examinations, their large black eyes never leaving him. It was as if they were peering into his very soul. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, every aspect of his being scrutinized and analyzed. Section 5. The Aftermath. Then just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The beings disappeared. The room vanished. Strieber was back in his cabin. He was lying on the floor of his living room. The fire had gone out. The cabin was freezing cold. Strieber got to his feet, his body aching. He felt drained, exhausted. He looked around the cabin, but everything seemed normal. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? He wasn't sure what to believe. He noticed strange marks on his body, long, thin scratches that hadn't been there before. He also felt different, changed somehow. He was plagued by nightmares and flashbacks. He couldn't shake the feeling that the beings were still watching him. Strieber tried to put the experience behind him, but it was easier said than done. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't concentrate on his work. He was haunted by what he had seen, by what he had felt. Section 6. Pieces of a Puzzle. Desperate for answers, Strieber sought professional help. He began seeing a psychiatrist, a specialist in hypnosis. Through hours of therapy sessions, fragments of memories began to surface. The terrifying details of that night came back in pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle slowly being assembled. Under hypnosis, Strieber recounted vivid details of his abduction. He described the beings, the room, the tests, and the telepathic communication. He spoke of a strange sense of peace that washed over him at times, interspersed with moments of sheer terror. The psychiatrist was convinced that Strieber wasn't making it up. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, but the trauma wasn't from something he had imagined. It was from something real, something that had happened to him. With each passing session, Strieber felt a growing certainty that what he had experienced was not a figment of his imagination. The details were too vivid, the emotions too real. He knew deep down that he had encountered something truly extraordinary. Section 7. A Story Shared. Strieber knew he had to tell his story. He had to share what he had learned about the beings, about their technology, about their intentions. He decided to write a book about his experience. He called it Communion. In Communion, Strieber recounted his terrifying experience in detail. He described the beings, the abduction, and the aftermath. He also explored the possibility that alien life might be real, and that we might not be alone in the universe. The book was an instant sensation. It became a New York Times bestseller and was translated into dozens of languages. People were captivated by Strieber's story. It resonated with something deep within them, a primal fear of the unknown. For the first time, a well-known author had gone public with a detailed account of alien abduction. Strieber's story sparked a national conversation about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Section 8. Communion and Controversy. Communion was more than just a book. It was a cultural phenomenon. It changed the way people thought about alien life. It made the idea of alien abduction part of the mainstream conversation. However, not everyone believed Strieber's story. Some people thought he was crazy, others accused him of making it all up for attention or money. His book sparked a heated debate that continues to this day. Skeptics pointed to a lack of physical evidence. They argued that Strieber's experience could be explained by sleep paralysis, hallucinations, or even mental illness. They questioned his motives, suggesting he was seeking fame or financial gain. But Strieber never wavered in his account. He maintained that what he had experienced was real, regardless of the skepticism and ridicule he faced. He continued to write about his experiences, and to speak out about the importance of taking the possibility of alien life seriously. Section 9. Unanswered Questions. Whitley Strieber's story is one of the most well-known and controversial alien abduction accounts of all time. It is a story that has captivated and divided people for decades. Whether you believe him or not, there is no denying the impact his story has had on our culture. The question remains: was Strieber's encounter real? Was he truly abducted by extraterrestrial beings? Or was it all just a figment of his imagination? The answer, like so much about the UFO phenomenon, remains elusive. One thing is certain: Strieber's story has left an undeniable mark on our collective consciousness. It has forced us to confront the possibility that we are not alone in the universe and that the truth, as they say, may be stranger than fiction.